What's up, family, and welcome back to the channel for another conversation. And today, I actually want to talk about and just kind of raise some alarms on how so many of the urban churches are building themselves around trauma bonds. So, in this conversation, I'm going to share some insight and likely share some red flags. And where this comes from is a few months ago on my channel, I started a little mini series called TikTok Theology, where we were going to be exploring the content of little micro sermons that people post or that people share on TikTok, for inspiration. As we begin to unpack these things, we begin to realize that these things were absolutely anything but inspirational, which happens a lot. So we're going to jump in this conversation. Before we do, you already know the routine. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider joining our community either on Discord, uh, YouTube membership program, or on Patreon. We'd love to have you. And also check out our merch. It's dope. you know. Also, check out some of the other content that we have on the channel. We have our Sunday sessions that are happening every Sunday. We have Bible study with an ex-pastor that happens every Wednesday, and right now we have a co-host with us for that show, which is Jason Foe from Dragons and Genesis. So we're having an incredible time. Yesterday was the first one that we did, and it was mind-blowingly amazing. So please go check that out. And then we also have the Ex Pastor Call-In show every first Sunday evening of the month, and that show has also just been absolutely incredible. And every now and then we do group therapy. So just keep a watch out. We're doing our best to build intentional community using this channel as a platform. All right, so let's jump into this conversation. Urban churches, like many communities, can serve as sanctuaries for healing, or regrettably, venues for exploitation. At the heart of some congregation lies a precarious dynamic where trauma bonds become a focal point, not just for shared experience, but for deeper entanglement with the institution. This discussion is critical as it seeks to unveil how trauma bonding can occur within these settings, potentially binding members to the church through their most vulnerable experiences, rather than healthy personal growth or community support. Recognizing these patterns is essential. It not only helps individuals navigate their relationships with these institutions, but also ensures that communities foster supportive, transparent, and ethical environments. As we explore these signs, the aim is not to vilify, but to bring awareness to practices that might hinder personal autonomy and recovery, encouraging communities to foster genuine support systems. So I want to highlight a few ways to recognize if a relationship with the church is actually a trauma bond. And I'm hoping that this information will be helpful for those of you who have family and friends who are still engaged in churches and maybe heavily engaged in urban churches. You might want to check on them. So let's start here. The most obvious one, which is the one that we kind of opened this conversation with, is just this the fact that the messages begin to center on trauma, or seem to primarily center on trauma. In many urban churches, the narrative often heavily focuses on trauma, presenting it as a common thread that unites members. And that's not too odd when you think about it, because, competitive sports tends to use that motif most often, but they tend to find a healthier way to do it. But it's this idea that we are united together against something. And in this case, the against something is trauma. So sermons might frequently recount tales of personal hardship or traumatic events as a means to connect with the congregation on an emotional level. And while discussing trauma can be a part of a healing process, its overemphasis can also keep individuals locked in a state of victimhood, perpetually reliving their pains for communal bonding rather than developing the tools and skills necessary for actually moving forward. Now, this continuous focus often creates an environment where personal identity and church identity merge into one, defined largely by the trauma bond. These settings struggle to encourage growth beyond the traumatic experiences, as the communal identity becomes anchored to past pains as opposed to personal progress, if that makes any sense. And so, but not only do you just have this messaging that's on trauma, which I've called this out a few times before in other videos, where you're dealing with these situations where where the messages are like, and I went through YouTube recently, just going through some popular churches and seeing what the recent messages were, and it's packed with stuff like surviving the storm, I made it out, I got away, the devil thought he had me, hell had its hand on me, I went through the fire but I don't smell like smoke, and it's all and it sounds incredibly inspirational and motivational when you're on that side of things. But once you uh, begin to realize that, like, holy snap, why is this the curriculum? You know what I'm saying? At some point, the curriculum has to evolve if if the curriculum is helpful. The only way the curriculum shouldn't need to evolve is if the program is meant to revolve or somewhat have a revolving door, um, which means people come in and people go out, right? But you don't have that in a church. For the most part, a commitment to a church is somewhat seen as a commitment for life. And so, if you're making this life commitment, and the messaging that you're going to be receiving for the rest of your life is going to be reinforcing this idea that you are in a traumatic experience, then yikes. But even beyond messaging, there's the issue of promises of healing. So church leaders typically position the church as the primary, if not sole, sanctuary for healing. And this oftentimes they go as far as suggesting that spiritual solutions provided by the church are superior to or even more necessary than other forms of psychological or emotional support, typically from professionals. This promise can be alluring as it is often offers a seemingly easy, structured path to recovery, wrapped in divine assurance. And what I like to add to that is that there is a financial aspect to this too. There's a reason that these type of ministries are more attractive to marginalized groups, because marginalized groups are often dealing with economic challenges, financial challenges. And so when you hear that, oh, $2,000, the $2,000 psychotherapist or psychiatrist or psychologist is actually the devil, and God can do it for free, then you do tend to, like, oh yeah, I'm going to gravitate towards the free thing. And then typically when you do gravitate the free thing, you are less concerned with interrogating its efficacy. You're just grateful that it's free, you know. Um, and then again, you kind of just give yourself over to the placebo effect, which I shouldn't have to highlight all the reasons that that can be problematic. But obviously, this is absolutely misleading because it discourages seeking comprehensive care, which includes professional therapy. By promoting the church as the ultimate healer, there's a risk of creating a dependency on the institution for emotional well-being, sidelining professional approaches that address trauma scientifically and holistically. And this is a major issue because when you do promote the church as the healer and as something that has superior healing abilities, and transformative capacity, and also at the same time villainize getting professional help, it makes it much more difficult for people who truly do need professional help to even consider it. They're already dealing with the economic barrier of, should I even, take that risk and spend some money and do this? But then that's even further complicated by, oh, will I not be trusting God? Will this mean that I don't have faith? You know. Moving right along, there's also urgency in conversion or recommitment, so always trying to get you back in. Leaders typically will urge immediate commitment or recommitment to the church, framing it as crucial for healing from trauma. The urgency is often presented in a manner that pressures individuals to act quickly, leveraging their vulnerable state to hasten a deepening bond within the church. So you find out someone is going through something especially traumatic, and I've seen people go as far as to say, you need to be at church this Sunday and God is going to do something for you. You know what I'm saying? And it's these type of things. It doesn't seem that insidious when you just, talking about it or when you're experiencing it. But when you actually become acclimated with how help happens, and when I say how help happens, I'm talking about real help, tangible help, sustainable help, duplicable help, if I can say it that way. You know, um, help that helps. When you find out how help happens, you tend to be more concerned about things that claim to help that actually don't, you know, because then you begin to realize that those things are actually distractions and are keeping people from getting the help that they need. And of course you're wanting them to get the help that they need so that you can live in a world with healthy people. But there's another aspect of that. There's also wanting them to get the help that they need so that they can, live their best lives, whatever the hell that means for them, and as a person who does realize that I share this planet with quite a few other people, I have a preference that other people would be able to have healthy lives, because that's going to make a healthier world for me to live in. That's my selfishness, right? Um, but obviously, tactics like these exploit emotional vulnerability, bypassing rational decision making, and fosters a hasty and often emotionally charged connection to the church. This urgency undermines genuine personal exploration and can tether a person to a church primarily through their trauma and not their faith or community spirit. And that's what you will find when you talk to a lot of people, especially those who are hyper religious. Their their connection to the belief system has nothing to do with theology. It has nothing to do with faith. And most times you're going to hear them say it. It was an experience that I had, and nobody's going to take this experience from me. And if you ever get the opportunity to truly interrogate that experience, at least 80% of those, I'd be willing to bet, at least 80% of those experiences are going to be experiences that were emotionally charged, with some of this urgency in conversion or commitment. You know. Another one that's super popular is testimonies focused on trauma. Testimonials that highlight dramatic deliverance from dire circumstances often play a significant role in these urban church settings. Often showcased to illustrate the transformative power of God, the pastor, or even just the power of being connected to the church. There's a popular story about a man who wrote a song called "I Believe You're My Healer." I believe you're my healer. I believe you are all I need. And when he wrote this song, he gave this powerful testimony about God delivering him from cancer or AIDS. It was something really deep, and I mean, people really bought into it, and the song was really popular, and people gave a lot of money because of this testimony and this God delivered him from the trauma of this deadly disease, and it came out later years that he never had a deadly disease at all. Yeah, you know. So, and I say that to say these stories often seem genuine and often feel very powerful, but are used strategically to attract and retain members by showcasing extreme examples as common outcomes conveniently without the requirement of interrogation or evidence. And so this focus skews members' expectations and experiences, suggesting that such dramatic changes are the norm. This is who my God is. This is what my God does, rather than an obfuscation of the truth. Now, it may also pressure members to conform to these narratives or embellish their experiences to fit the expected mold, reinforcing the trauma bond. And that very much is what happens. So, using this kind of example, that the real life example that I opened up this part with this guy who claims that God healed him from cancer, and that's why he wrote this song. And then you imagine the emotional attachment that people have with that song, especially after hearing his testimony, seeing him talk about his testimony. And for you, that you haven't been working those cognitive muscles yet. So you still believe that hearing that testimony is evidence that this absolutely happened, because somehow you went through 13 years of public education and still have not learned the lesson that people will lie for attention or acceptance. And even though somehow you haven't consciously came to that conclusion, you will subconsciously do it, which means you'll typically lie for acceptance or for attention. And this becomes very common, not just in church. I mean, let's not play these games. You know, You can barely go to a bar without hearing somebody lying. And the only people who don't know when someone else is lying are people who don't know, you know. But it's for people who are in the know. Like if you're fairly knowledgeable about things, it's a little easier to tell when someone is embellishing, lying. And then there's also just there's some logical deviations that you can look out for, which is something that I do kind of specialize in. But the big point is that if you hear this story, you see this story, you attach your belief to this idea that God does heal, and let's just say you got sick, and it wasn't even a major sickness. Let's just say you got flu, and it was a really bad flu, and you were taking some medicine, but you were also singing this song and listening to that testimony, and then you decide to go to church even though you're not feeling that great. But then you get to church, and in the middle of the service, you start feeling a little better, which is possibly a combination of the medicine that you were taking, as well as the social stimulus of what you're experiencing, which is getting you all getting your chemicals fired off in all different types of ways. So you're feeling better. And so now you have no way to verify, prove, or even demonstrate that God has actually done anything in your life, but you are going to be tempted at this moment to give God the glory. Not because, and this is the tricky part, you're not really giving God the glory because you think God is going to give you extra kudos for this. It's the thing, you know that people are going to enjoy hearing you tell this story. You know that they're going to have a very emotional response, and you want that feeling. And one of the things that I did want to start doing in the last few years that I was still operational in church is start creating spaces where people could kind of live in that honesty. Because I did realize that a lot of churches created this atmosphere where people tended to cave to the pressure to pretend. And I find that to be overwhelmingly unhelpful. But that's why I did the video on meditation earlier this week as well, just to kind of help us all start thinking about mindfulness a little more. Because again, the things that I talk about that are happening in the church in many cases are not just happening in the church because so many people have been impacted by the church, because so many of our ideologies have been impacted by religious superstition. Even when we separate from religion, we still have those superstitions because, again, as I've pointed out several times, religions didn't make us superstitious. We made religions because we are superstitious. So getting rid of the religion doesn't get rid of the superstition. You still have to do the work to work on becoming more critically engaged. All right, let's move right along. I keep hitting the wrong keyboard. Um, There's also isolation from external support. And I think this one, we often see easily. It's a key red flag when it's discouragement from seeking external help. When church teachings implicitly or explicitly dismiss the value of external counseling or therapy, it can create an insular environment where the church becomes the only source of truth and support. Which I hate that phrase, source of truth. Like, even when people use it at work, it's a pet peeve of mine. Every now and then someone suggests that, oh, we need a source of truth for this department or this department or this department. And I typically just softly remind them that we already have a source of truth. It's called reality. Reality is our source of truth. But anyway, but this isolation can be detrimental as it limits members' exposure to diverse perspectives and professional advice, potentially stalling or complicating their healing and growth processes. It reinforces dependency on the church for emotional and spiritual sustenance, marginalizing the role of broader support networks that could aid in recovery. And again, this is a major issue when churches create this type of ideology that nobody can help you but us, and that if you are trying to get help outside of this system, you are somehow being disloyal or unfaithful or non-committal to God. And that's, if you really believe that these people are representatives of God and that they hear from God, or that you really believe that this God is that type of jackass, then that absolutely frightens you from pursuing help when you desperately need it. And again, of course, not if you're not getting that help, then you're really not getting the opportunity to craft your own life, and explore yourself. Obviously, that's an issue, and it also leads to our next issue, which is dependency culture. Dependency within a church manifests when members are encouraged to rely heavily on leaders for guidance in personal and spiritual matters. And this dynamic can diminish personal autonomy, making it difficult for individuals to make decisions or solve problems independently. And this is absolutely something that my entire paradigm has shifted on this, and it literally governs the way that I have conversations with people, and the way we do things on my channel. Many of you know that I've been highly adverse to being anybody's teacher or educator when it comes to the channel, or being anybody's guru. I'm not giving you advice per se, even though we do have an advice segment. Um, but it's because of this issue of I have watched the impact of how people who've been heavily engaged with urban churches have, slowly but surely become very dependent on other people's voices and other people's ideas for how to live their own life. And so what we try to do on our channel is craft conversations that, yeah, because it's my channel, it is my ideas, but I always try to give the caveat that I'm not sharing my ideas because I think they're the best thing for everybody. I'm sharing my ideas to model how I critically engage my life, and try to structure what I think may be best for me. And hopefully that if you kind of see that being modeled, you get permission to do the same. I really don't want people looking at my channel and saying, "Ooh, I want to think just like Darante." I'd much rather for people to look at my channel and say, "Ooh, I think what he's saying is I have the freedom to figure this shit out," and that's typically where I go. So I don't always share sources and things of that nature, because I don't want you to trust me. I don't want you to trust my research. I don't want you to trust my sources. I don't want to build that type of relationship of dependency. I don't want anybody even looking at me like that, because number one, that's a lot of pressure to have to be a voice in somebody else's life, and many pastors like are suffering tremendously right now as far as mentally, because of that pressure of always having to be the voice. Number one, as a pastor, you have to be a voice for the group, and you have to be a voice for the individuals, while also trying to find a voice for your life. And that becomes a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. Um, and not all pastors submit themselves to that. There are some pastors who have some healthy ways of engaging, and so they learned early on that, hey, I'm not going to be your hero, and nor am I going to preach sermons that make me sound like your hero. So I don't create that unnecessary expectation. But when churches do foster this type of dependency, it prevents members from developing their resilience and their own sense of self-efficacy. Over time, this dependency can become a defining characteristic of the relationship between the member and the church, with the latter assuming a disproportionate role in the personal lives of its congregation. And this becomes particularly problematic for those who become attached to such a church and later deconvert or deconstruct. The aftermath for them is typically a train wreck, because the community likely served as an illusion of sustainability. And then, in the absence of the development of personal resilience, once that illusion is gone, they're having to deal with the fact like, holy shit, I've never stood on my own 2 feet, or I haven't stood on my own 2 feet in a long time. Because that's kind of what that trauma bond and dependency does. It makes you think. It kind of lulls you into this ideology that depending on these other people to always be there for me, and to always have the answers I need, that this is actually not necessarily healthy for you. That if that and this is a hard thing for me, because this was a major shift in my own life, is that the people who really love you, and are really capable of helping you, are going to empower you to help yourself, you know, and that's been a mind-blowing lesson for me, and has impacted my life significantly, of being able to recognize who's just talk, you know what I'm saying, and who's really here to help when it comes to that type of help. And a person who really wants to help you, they want to, they or they should, in my opinion, want to help you, not need them to be helped. You know what I'm saying? Um, it- or at least that's just me, right? The next one is fear based messaging, which is employed when leaders suggest that leaving the church or failing to follow its directives will lead to spiritual decline or a resurgence of past trauma or punishment. These messages bind members to the church through fear rather than faith, creating a traumatic bond based on anxiety and apprehension rather than genuine fulfillment. Now, this tactic not only hinders personal freedom, but also instills a chronic fear of the outside world, which can exasperate the trauma rather than alleviate it. Many members may feel trapped, believing that their safety and well being are contingent upon adherence to the church. And, like, I have to be honest with you, there are quite a few pastors out there that pull together entire cabals of members to spy on people who have left the church to gather negative information about those people to sow throughout the church, so that others will be discouraged from leaving. So if you find out someone left the church and a few weeks later they lost their job, you're going to try to get that information disseminated through your church, and you're going to say stuff like create a narrative that people who leave this church are leaving this hedge of protection, and I'm not pulling that language out of my ass. This is literally language that's used in these urban churches. Once you leave this covering, I don't know what might happen to you. And, like, yikes, right? Also, there's the us versus them mentality, and us versus them mentality solidifies trauma bonds by framing the church as a bastion against an inherently hostile outside world. You can't trust any of them out there. This is why you keep going. And it's funny, this is where you get the kind of like the other side of the no true Scotsman, which is all people are this, or all men are this, or all women are this. Churches, like the urban churches, gravitate towards this, like especially when it comes to relationships. And men, this is how it gets so many urban women in the churches, is because these women have had disappointing relationships with men, and so the church typically reinforces this, the opposite side of no true Scotsman, which is all men are this outside of God. All men are this outside of God being involved. All jobs are evil. All corporations are evil. This is why it's necessary for you to be on our side, because being on this side keeps you protected and safe from that hostile world out there. Of all those men who are dogs without Jesus, and all of those companies which aren't Christian companies, which are really just trying to take your life away from you. This worldview leverages trauma as a rallying point, suggesting that the church is the soul's safe haven against external threats, which may be exaggerated or misrepresented to enhance cohesion within the church. I hope you realize that that's not an issue that's isolated to the church. Politicians do the same thing every 4 years. This is obviously a divisive tactic, and it inhibits members from engaging openly with external communities or ideas, limiting their worldviews and reinforcing the church's narrative as the only safe or true perspective. It can stifle personal growth and increase dependency on the church for social and emotional needs. Again, I just have to highlight that this is also an issue in politics. This is like, I typically come off of social media every 4 years because I really can't stomach a lot of the things that I hear people say. And the things that I can't stomach are probably not some of the things that you can't stomach. I can stomach stupid stuff. I can stomach hateful stuff. I can stomach. I grew up with irreverent comedy, so I can stomach pretty much anything. What I don't like is disingenuousness paraded as righteousness. And that the red flag for that is always when we are silencing the voices of others just to support our particular narrative. I will never be a fan of that, and I will never be on that bandwagon. If something is worth supporting, it should be able to stand up to scrutiny. And so anytime I see something that if somebody has a dissenting opinion or a voice of or a word of scrutiny, and those people are immediately ostracized or villainized, I want no part in what's going on there. Um, that's me. You learned a little something about me there. This next one, which is number 9, is obviously financial exploitation, which we do see Financial demands can be intertwined with promises of healing or blessings with leaders suggesting that generous tithing or donations are integral to personal wellness or recovery from trauma. And this can place undue financial pressure on members, particularly those who are vulnerable and seeking hope or divine favor. Obviously, these practices can strain personal finances and create additional stress, especially if the financial contributions are seen as a measurement of faith or commitment. And when you're a part of any organization, a membership-based organization, that's how your financial contributions are seen. They are seen as a measurement of your faith or your commitment, which in itself, that is not a bad thing. The problem comes when on the other side of that, you see it connected to God's willingness to bless you, you know. And this one is a hard one because you see it a lot, and you want to think that you see it most from pastors, and that's really not where you see it at, even though, obviously it's there. But where you see the most of it at are a lot of these rogues and nomads who float through these churches, often in the parking lots and in the bathrooms, finding vulnerable people to prophesy to, watching the way that those people interact with the service, and then finding them near their car and say, "Oh, I saw the way God was all over you, and He gave me a word for you." And sometimes it's something as unscrupulous as, God gave me this word, but in order for you to, in order for this word to manifest, you have to sow me a seed. That's the unscrupulous kind. Or sometimes it's just delusional, which is still harmful, which is God is going to do this thing for you if you sow somebody else's seed. And the reason I say that one is not as unscrupulous because, as you can see, that person who does that at that moment gets literally nothing out of it. And that's something that I do try to challenge people to pay attention to the nuance of, that everybody involved with this is not trying to scam other people. They actually believe the hype, you know. And so you do have some that'll do that. But but yeah, and so then this last one, which is really a big one, and that's a lack of boundaries. And it's evident when church leaders involve themselves excessively in the personal lives of members under the guise of spiritual guidance or trauma healing. And this is one that I did personally apologize to some of my former staff who were on staff at my church. I apologize about being overly concerned about shit that wasn't my business in the first place and had no impact on the service that they gave to our community. I'm getting on to people about who they're sleeping with. And the thing that I have you on my staff to do is to play an instrument. So who you sleep with does not inhibit you from playing an instrument in any shape, form, or fashion, unless you're violating some law, which in these cases they weren't. And so ultimately, it was just never my business. But as a Christian pastor, I felt like that I had to answer to God for these things, and that it was my job to spiritually steward these people, which basically meant shepherding their personal lives. As you can see, I'm incredibly averse to that now. Hey, homie, you do you. You know, anybody who wants advice, I'm more than willing to give it, but I typically don't offer advice without being invited. And I just don't get in people's business like that. And then some people are pretty much a little disappointed sometimes when they do come and ask me about advice for personal stuff, because I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what to do, not because I'm thinking that, I'm not going to tell you, but I'm not going to tell you what to do because I don't know enough of the variables in your life to be able to successfully tell you what to do. So no, I am not going to be that scam artist in your life. Um, so yeah, anyway, but this intrusion can be overwhelming and obviously inappropriate, complicating personal situations and preventing members from establishing healthy autonomy. The erosion of boundaries can lead to environments where personal space and privacy are not respected, making it difficult for individuals to establish healthy personal identities separate from their church identity. And this can reinforce the trauma bond, making it harder for members to recognize or challenge the unhealthy dynamics, which is one of the reasons why I do encourage secular people, non-believers, free thinkers, skeptics, agnostics, atheists, whatever. If you have people in your life who you care about, who are members of these type of urban churches, I'd encourage you just to check in on them every now and then, and just to be a safe, make yourself available as a safe space for them. Because I assure you, if they're working with it heavily, then they're probably dealing with some of these flags. and they likely don't have a safe place to talk about those things. And in order for the place to be safe, it has to be a type of situation where they don't feel like you're going to use this as the aha moment, as the I told you so moment, as the see none of this is real moment. Sometimes we have to focus on being a little more humanly available for people, which means your life isn't about my agenda. Your life isn't about the things that I want to see. And so, in order to create this moment, in order to create a moment that is safe for you, I'm going to remove my agenda from the equation. And that's hard to do sometimes because we really want people like, we all feel like we want what's best for other people, and we may want what's best for other people. But I think as skeptics, we should also realize that we have no clue what's actually best for other people. And so what we can do is assist them with navigating that road. And if they just so happens to start leaning towards a road that does align with our agenda, then hell, it's fair game at that moment. And then they're likely going to be more receptive of it as well, with that dynamic. So the big point is recognizing these signs is vital for anyone involved in a spiritual community as they highlight the potential for exploitation under the guise of support and healing. And for those navigating such environments, awareness is the first step towards ensuring that their community engagements are healthy and genuinely supportive. And so, yes, while these videos on my channel are by and large for atheists and the non-believing community, to give them insight into some areas that maybe they did not have before, just to give some new perspective. But this particular video is also for a person who may be a believer currently involved in church and may not be considering deconstructing or leaving their faith in any shape, form, or fashion, but just may have some concerns that my church or my relationship with my church may be a trauma bond, and maybe this video will be helpful for them. Maybe they won't leave the faith. And again, I don't need them to. I don't need anybody else's life to mirror the decisions that I've made in my life. But hopefully it'll help them make better decisions about the communities that they're a part of so that they can actually get the benefits from those communities that they signed up for. Now, secular communities also need to remain vigilant, ensuring that our approaches to support and community building do not replicate these unhealthy patterns. Promoting transparency, encouraging professional support, and respecting personal autonomy are crucial in fostering environments that truly aid in recovery and growth. By being aware of these signs, individuals can protect themselves and contribute to healthier community practices that's ultimately in all of our best interest. I've said this on a few other videos and a few other conversations, but my big goal is to get to healthy outcomes. That's my big goal, is to get to healthy outcomes. But I'm convinced that we can't get to healthy outcomes until we have healthy relationships. And I'm convinced that we can't get to healthy relationships until we have healthy people. And so that's where I kind of take my stand. That's where I do my work. While, yes, a part of my work is providing insight into the way religion has worked in the communities that I've been involved in, the whole goal, that may be the bait, but that's really not the point. The point is to create some alternatives for people to make the best out of their lives and be able to have those safe, secure, sound places and spaces where they can explore their own capacity and find the answers that matter to them. And we need to understand that by far and large, these are the real reasons people go to church. These are the real reasons people join religions and religious communities. They're not joining these communities to learn about God. Most of them have already relegated that they won't really know anything about God until they die. They're joining these communities for very personal reasons, admirable personal reasons. And if we know that these communities are not equipped to provide the benefits that they espouse, and we know that these benefits are, helpful, maybe even necessary for people to have healthy lives, why not start creating the alternatives? so that people don't have to go to these trauma bond clinics, but they can actually be a part of healthy communities that don't care about who they're sleeping with, or what they're smoking, or what they're drinking, or what words they use, or what pronouns they use, or anything else. But that just values them for being people and creates tools and resources for them to make the most out of their lives. All right. I feel like I've talked a lot. I've shared a lot. Um, I hope you've learned something. I hope this has created some value that perhaps has even lit a spark for you. That makes you think about some things that maybe you didn't think about before. Um, but either way, y'all know I always enjoying this. I enjoy doing this. If you haven't done so already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, check out the merch, and consider joining our community either through Discord, Patreon, or on the YouTube membership program. We'd love to have you anywhere you can find where you want to get in and get fit. All right, I think that's all I have for now. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and stay beautiful if you can. I'll holla at you.